everybody, this is Macy.
And Rachel, and you're listening to the Farmington Public Library podcast, where we keep you in the loop of all the library happenings.
And up to date on all the books that should be on your to-read list. The following content does not reflect the views or opinions of the City of Farmington or its employees. Hi everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This episode we're taking kind of a different direction with our book recommendations. In addition to having a few adult fiction recommendations, we are trying to incorporate things of all age groups for people. So we're sharing some junior fiction recommendations that are our personal favorites, and then we are also talking about some of the new programs we have here at the library focusing on the tween age group.
The last couple of months, we have recently started at the library doing crafts and book boxes that specifically target the tween age group.
Yes.
And so, do you want to talk about one of the other new things that we're doing with that age group?
Sure, yeah. So, like you've already said, we started our tween book boxes, which are already out, all completed. And we started the tween take and make crafts. And for April, we are going to introduce our in-person tween crafts. So April 23rd at 4, you can come into the library and we're going to make these little felt sewing projects. They're really cute. They're all different. Some of them are dinosaurs, llamas, different things. And that's for ages 9 to 11. And on April 2nd is when we will have this sign up out for that. So just sign up beforehand. And you make sure you have your library card.
All right, Macy and I thought we would talk about some of our favorite books that feature sibling characters or are about siblings because April 10th is National Sibling Day.
Yes.
What do you have?
So the first book that I have is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Any patron that talks to me at the library most likely knows that Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors. This specific book, Malibu Rising, is a part of a 4-book series that Taylor Jenkins Reid has, but the series, it's called the Reidverse. Reid is in her last name, and they're technically categorized as historical fiction, but these books involve these fake celebrities, and it's something about their life. It almost reads as if you were reading a memoir about a downfall of a celebrity or something like that. Malibu Rising takes place in the 80s, and it takes place in Malibu, California. And the main character, her name is Nina. Nina and her 3 siblings are kids of a famous celebrity who really is a terrible person throughout all 4 books, and he never has a main part. He's just mentioned in all the books, but it's Mick Riva. And
This is interesting because I didn't know they were all kind of related to each other.
So in a way they are. They all mention each other.
Yeah.
But so, Malibu Rising, it's about the 4 siblings, Nina, who's the main character, and then she has 2 brothers, Jay and Hud, and then her younger sister, Kit. Every year, the Riva siblings have a gigantic party at their Malibu house. And so this book has 2 timelines, and I've realized now so many of the books I picked to feature have 2 timelines going on. But the first timeline is Nina and her 3 siblings preparing for this annual party that they have where the hottest of the hottest celebrities are. And celebrities of any kind, sport athletes, actresses, singers, just it's a whole hodgepodge of people. And then the other timeline is their mom, whose name was June, I believe, and her relationship with Mick, their dad, and the downfall of it, and then how the Riva kids ended up to where they are today. Nina, she is the main focus, and she's a surfer, and she's also a model for surfing. The plot line is really vague because it's just about all the stuff they have going on and how they've seemed to reach the height of perfection. And at this party, it all just kind of falls apart.
Oh, okay.
It does feature sibling relationships. It's California in the 80s. And so it's pretty cool.
So kind of like a lifestyle of the rich and famous.
Kind of.
From a sibling.
I like it a lot.
Well, I like that I now know how those all connected. Not to switch gears so abruptly because mine is going to be like really different compared to what you picked. For my first sibling book, I picked The Alchemist by Michael Scott. It's a YA book, and it's a decent sized series. It starts out being about this book that is being protected by Nicholas Flamel, who everybody thinks died, a long time ago, but he actually is alive and immortal. And he is tasked with being in charge of the book and keeping it safe. And on his journey, there's a prophecy about these two siblings and how they're going to kind of save everybody. It gets into the wrong hands. The book can be devastating to the world, basically. He finds the siblings, tells them about their destiny, basically, and then they kind of go on this quest to fulfill it. And then there's an antagonist that's a big part of the story, John Dee, who is also a legendary real person, like Nicholas Flamel being a kind of really legendary talked about alchemist in the fantasy world. They're kind of arch nemesis. And so there is some back and forth between them, fighting each other in between all of this stuff going on. It does follow Sophie and Josh, who are the siblings. They kind of go on this journey with Nicholas Flamel, where they visit a lot of other mythology creatures in different cultures and stuff, and they get power as they go. It's really fun. I would say if you like Percy Jackson, it's kind of fun to go along with them on their journey through these different mythological creatures and these different cultures of mythology. There's a lot of back and forth magic stuff between the two, Flamel and Dee, fighting over the book and stuff, and everybody is just waiting to see what Sophie and Josh's destiny holds in store for saving the world, basically. So
that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty big series. I think it's a pretty fun series.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So, switching gears yet again, because our choices are very different, I think. The other book I chose that features siblings is called The Chicken Sisters, and we actually don't have it here at the library, but it is available on the Libby app, which features ebooks and audiobooks that you get through your library card. It's part of your library card membership.
Yeah.
And it's available both as an ebook and as an audiobook. I read this book a couple years ago, and it's about two sisters, May and Amanda. They grew up with a mom who, in a small town in Kansas, owns a really popular chicken restaurant. In this small town, though, there is a rival chicken restaurant, too. Fast forward so many years in the future, May lives in New York now, and she kind of has a social media influencer lifestyle. That's her job. She works for a company, but her job with them is very much like the social media influencers that we see today. And Amanda stayed in their little town in Kansas, but ended up marrying the son of the rival chicken restaurant. So, and both May and Amanda have kind of always had a difficult relationship with their mom. But anyhow, where this story kind of takes off is that May loses her job in New York and therefore kind of loses this persona that she's put out of this really idyllic life that she leads. But she has an opportunity to kind of get back into the game of what she wants to do by submitting the story of her mom's restaurant and of the other chicken restaurant to a show called Food Wars. It's like a restaurant competition show that we see on Food Network all the time. She has to get her sister Amanda, who she has not talked to in ages, to agree, and to get Amanda's mother-in-law to agree to do this show. And then May will come back home to Kansas and help her mom with her restaurant. And it's about them competing for the title of Food Wars. And then with the prize money, May's hoping to be able to take off her career. So the story is about just the sister relationship between the two of them. They both have led very different lives, both dealt with their childhood differently. There's romance involved and all this other stuff. So it's really good.
That sounds fun. I don't know why, but when you started describing the premise, it was not going how I thought. Where it was then they go to a food competition show. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about one of my favorite graphic novels that we have in the library, called The Cursed Princess Club by Lamb Cat. This is kind of a hard graphic novel to describe because there's a lot going on in it, I think. But basically the main premise revolves around this king who has 3 daughters and a son, but he's kept them very closed off from a lot of the world, and they're all the daughters are in general a stereotypical princess vibe, all that, except for one of them. Her name is Gwendolyn, and she's different from the rest of her family, which she's never noticed before and nobody's ever pointed out before, but through a series of events with another kingdom where their father decides it's time for them to get married, they get introduced to this other family, and she finds out in a really sad way that she is different. It hits her all at once, and she kind of runs away into the forest. And while she's running, she finds this home in the middle of the woods that is full of other princesses, and they call themselves the Cursed Princess Club. And it's basically all these other princesses that feel kind of similar to her, and they feel like outcasts in their own kingdoms for different reasons. There's a lot of really fun characters in the story, and the themes with the siblings themselves. Gwendolyn's sisters have never made her feel different, I think.
Right.
And they have a really good, strong family bond, I think. And her brother, too. He champions all of them all the time. But then the club itself really helps Gwendolyn feel more accepted now that she knows she looks different and is a little different than the stereotype. She doesn't feel less accepted when she meets them. I think she kind of fits right in, and it's a really good story as far as like it does cover the other siblings a little bit too, and their relationships and their journeys in the book.
I also think too the graphic novel does a nice job of the three sisters are definitely extremes of their personality.
Yeah, like they're like Disney-esque version of princesses, which is not like the reality.
Honestly, one of my favorite parts of the graphic novel is in the beginning when the dad wakes his daughters up in the morning, and the oldest sister, as she's getting ready, I think it's these fairy critters helped her get ready in the morning.
She has like animals that brush her hair and stuff.
And then the other sister has like flowers that like bloomed overnight, and then Gwendolyn has possums in her bed.
Yeah, she has like a possum and is it a rat?
I think so.
And they're just like sit on her head, which is kind of silly, but
it's a really cute graphic novel. I love it.
That's a series. I think we have all 3 of them, I believe. And Macy obviously has read some of it, but yeah, it is really cute. Yeah. We were going to also mention an obvious sibling story, but one that I think we both really enjoy is Little Women.
Yes.
By Louisa May Alcott.
I mean, I feel like Little Women, since, it's a classic, so I feel like an explanation is almost unnecessary for the book. I think we thought it would be remiss for us to not mention it when talking about siblings and sisterhood. It's just such an iconic classic of sisterhood. And
I would say that the 4 sisters are all, very different. But I think that everybody who's read it can relate to one of them in some way, at least at one point in the story. And it's kind of like that timeless, the sister bond in there, and the different maybe hiccups in sisterhood and like the moments that are fun. And it's just got all of those pieces in there. It's really nice.
And obviously we do have that book. I don't want to say we have different versions of it, but we have the original, and then we also have, I think, a junior fiction that's kind of like a condensed version of it. And then also, too, we have a couple of the DVDs.
Yeah, the
movies that have been adapted.
I think it's like the 1994 version and the 2018, the newest adaptation of it. Mm-hmm. And there's also a graphic novel called Jo Beth Amy Meg or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I haven't read it yet, but it looks like another good retelling and a different way of it. I mean, any version of it is something I'm willing to read or watch for sure.
We wanted to take a minute to introduce a new segment we will be having throughout the summertime. We will be doing our own summer book club where we'll be reading 2 books over the summer months and discussing them on the podcast. Stay tuned for more information.
We, over the last few months, obviously, with every episode, we do a bunch of book recommendations, and we always incorporate a decent amount of YA books, but we thought it would be neat to just talk about a few of our favorite junior fiction books that we have here at the library. I know I like to ever so often read a junior fiction book. A lot of them are really cute, and they're kind of nostalgic for me to read as well, because I think it reminds me of when I was a little child reading these junior fiction books, and I don't know, it always feels like a warm hug to me to read a good junior fiction book.
Yeah, I'll say when the books come in before they get put into our system to check out and stuff, I'm always like the most interested in the junior fiction books. Right. And I'm like, oh, I want to read all of these, and then of course I never have time to read out all of them, but yeah, they all look fun all the time.
And I think in junior fiction books too, we see a lot of really neat aspects. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is, too, junior fiction books are obviously written with that age group in mind. And when you're that age, I think that you are more open to reading about worlds that don't necessarily make sense in books in terms of world building or things that go on in the book that if you were reading it as a young adult, you'd be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How is that even possible?
Yeah.
But I think the younger you are, the easier that it is for you to suspend your disbelief a little bit. And so I think we see a lot more of magical themes and things like that in junior fiction, which I just think always makes junior fiction fun to read.
Yeah. So one of my favorite junior fiction books is called Ham Helsing, Vampire Hunter by Rich Moyer. And it's a graphic novel. And it is, like you were saying, kind of nonsensical. And it's about this pig who, you know, is on a quest to find monsters, and he has like all these little friends with him, and it's got really silly jokes in it, and like it's just a fun read, and it's not scary or anything, even though it's got some themes because of their monster hunting, and it pokes fun at itself a little bit because that's what the jokes are, but you know, it's really funny even as an adult to read.
That sounds cute.
Yeah, so it's a spin-off, of course, of, if you don't know, Van Helsing, who's a vampire hunter. So yeah, and but anyways, I don't know why it's really my favorite. Cute. I think it's just really funny.
Yeah.
And it's a series, but I've only read the first one, so I need to go back and read the other two that we have.
So the first pick I have is called The Wildly Unknown Myth of Apple and Dorothy. Mm-hmm. And honestly, this is such a cute book. But at the same time, the author does a really nice job of showcasing two characters who have such a range of emotions and how you can feel more than one emotion at the same time. But what the book is about, it's about two young girls whose names are Apple and Dorothy. And they live in a world where they're not gods and goddesses, but they're in the lineage of gods and goddesses. And it revolves around Greek mythology, which is one reason I was originally drawn to reading the book. They're technically ancestors of the gods. And Apple is from the lineage of Hera, and then Dorothy is from the lineage of Pandora. So Apple, because Hera is the super cool goddess in this timeline, is super popular at school, yada yada yada. Dorothy, being in the lineage of Pandora, is not super accepted at school because Pandora is kind of frowned upon. And if you know any of the Greek myths, you know, she just unleashed a lot of chaos for everybody. But the one reason why Apple and Dorothy are good friends is because their moms are best buds. They're super good friends. But anyway, in this world, once a year, all of these people who are ancestors of the gods and goddesses kind of live on this hill, is how it's described in the book, and it's kind of a realm that exists between not having to be on Mount Olympus up in the sky, but you're not totally in the mortal realm either, but you get to enjoy the things of the mortal world a little bit. Okay. But so once a year at winter solstice with their families, everyone living on this hill has to make the infamous climb on the ladder to Mount Olympus to preserve their kind of immortality for the year and what the book calls near godness. This one year, Dorothy's mom decides not to do it, not to make the climb on the ladder, and she doesn't tell anybody. Just as they're all ascending, she just doesn't go. And her mom decided to not do it because she says, I want to appreciate things knowing that they could end. And that will never be possible if I keep making this climb. Well, because fate is a real thing in this book. A few months after the winter solstice, Dorothy's mom dies in a tragic car accident. And the book, you know, it gets to that. But what happens and where the whole book takes off is that the gods, of course, were upset with Dorothy's mom for making that decision and gave an ultimatum to everybody living on the hill and said, by winter solstice, you have to decide to either become human and stay in the mortal realm, or you can come join us on Mount Olympus. No more in between. And so everyone is upset at Dorothy, even though she's a child and it's not her fault, but the actions of her family, what they've caused, yada, yada, yada. Well, Apple and Dorothy have a plan that will allow them to continue to be together because Apple decides that she wants to be on Mount Olympus. Dorothy does not want to be on Mount Olympus and have to live out the rest of her life forever and ever without her mom. She decides that she wants to be human. But neither of the girls want to be separate from each other. And they have a plan so that they both can make the decision they want but still be together, which backfires. And then they have to go on all these quests to kind of resolve the trouble that they caused, which is why it's called The Widely Unknown Myth of Apple and Dorothy, because of all the trouble that they get into trying to fix everything. So it's a really cute story, but again, the author does a really nice job of showing specifically Dorothy wrestling with all these different emotions and her understanding at a young age that she can feel all of these things at the same time.
Interesting. It's got some heavy stuff, but it sounds like a good friendship story.
Yes.
Right? Well, my other pick for some of my favorite junior books is The School for Good and Evil, which is a series. I have, again, only read the first one. I do need to read the rest. I think there's quite a few. I want to say there's like 6. And this is a story about these two friends from a village, Sophie and Agatha, I believe are their names. And Agatha's kind of an outcast in her village. She like lives on the outskirts, and the people in the town think her mom's a witch and stuff, and she's kind of like a more subdued, I don't want to say gloomy child, because that's not it. She's just like more subdued and not as excited about everything as her friend Sophie. Sophie's like really beautiful and like dreams of being like a princess and like very stereotypical, you know, kind of princess stuff. So there's this thing that happens where 2 kids from the village are taken to this legendary school for good and evil. And it just so happens that this year, Agatha and Sophie get chosen. So they basically get taken from their homes and dropped into this school where they learn how to become either a hero or a villain. And Agatha gets put into the princess hero school, and Sophie gets put into the like villain school where all the kids who are kind of rough and tumble and stuff and have, you know, nefarious things take place. But anyways, it's kind of a story about their friendship and them trying to find their way back to each other in this weird new world. And it's got a lot of like fairy tale vibes around it, and they both feel like they've ended up in the wrong place and they're trying to fit into this place, but along the way I think that they kind of maybe find that they do fit. And so
that sounds super cute.
Yeah, and it's kind of silly sometimes, like, but there's a lot of heavier friendship moments, but also some fun silly stuff. It's also a movie on Netflix, which I had read it before I watched it, but the movie's probably worth a watch if you're just wanting to watch like a fun, cute kind of fantasy thing.
Oh, cute. Yeah. So the second one that I chose is actually a newer book. It's called, but honestly, so is the first one I picked is newer as well. But so the second one I picked is The Swifts, A Dictionary of Scoundrels by Beth Lincoln. And honestly, this book is good for anybody who loves words and who loves languages and the English language. It's a fun book involving that theme. But so basically the Swifts, it's a modern family who still upholds a bunch of ancient traditions. And one of those traditions being that when a child in the family is born, they're taken before this prized dictionary, which is like a family heirloom, and a name is selected for them, which isn't that weird of a concept, I don't think. But then that name that's chosen for them from this dictionary is supposed to then dictate the person's personality, what they'll be when they grow up. So the main character's name is Shenanigan Swift.
Oh my goodness.
So, anyway, and she definitely lives up to that name. She's always getting into trouble and yada, yada, yada. But where kind of the plot of the story takes off is that every 10 years, the whole Swift family hosts a gigantic family reunion at the manor where Shenanigan Swift and her sisters and mom and dad live. And there's always a bunch of things that go on at these family reunions. One of them is that everyone tries to find an ancient treasure hidden by an ancestor in the manor. And so while that's going on, and while everyone's looking for this heirloom, weird stuff starts happening. And they're basically, someone ends up dead, and Shenanigans Swift is all like, I'm going to figure out who is doing this nonsense. And she's like, I'm going to be an investigator. And then another weird thing happens, and another weird thing happens. And so this whole book is about Shenanigans Swift getting into shenanigans and trying to show that she can be taken seriously despite what her name is. But it's a really fun book. It's cute. There's a lot of wordplay. There's a lot of puns. And part of that stems from just the idea of the novel, with it being about a dictionary and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's a fun read for sure.
It does sound fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here at the end, we thought we would kind of touch base with our reading goals for the year. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of January, we talked about what our individual goals were for reading this year.
Yes.
And so with it being April, 4 months in, I guess we can check in and see how we're each doing with those. I can start if you want.
Sure.
So my goal was that I wanted to read one nonfiction book a month. Mm-hmm. And I've read 2.
That's not bad.
Which isn't terrible.
No.
Like I talked about previously, and I've mentioned multiple times, so people probably are tired of hearing about this book, but I read The Sisterhood of the CIA, which was good. It was also really long and really big, but it was still good if you're interested in that sort of thing. And then the one nonfiction book that I just finished up, we just actually got on our new bookshelf. It's called One in a Millennial. I think it's Katie Kennedy.
You did read, you read that?
Yeah. I haven't brought it back yet. But
okay. I thought it looked interesting too.
It honestly, I loved reading it. It had a lot of relatable stuff in it, but it was funny, but there was also some serious notes in it. Mm-hmm. But basically, she just picks apart a bunch of female stereotype stuff within the generation of millennials. Yeah, and she just talks about it, but picks it apart and what it's like, and I really enjoyed reading it. So those are the 2 I've read. So I'm not necessarily keeping up with my goal of reading one nonfiction book a month, but I'm still trying to get there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good, because honestly, what overall the goal is really to enjoy what you're reading, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though that might not be what you started with.
Yeah.
As I say that, I haven't kept up with my goal at all. At all.
You're still reading.
I think I wanted to read a little bit of mystery this year, and I thought about doing some more historical nonfiction, and I have read 0 historical nonfiction, wow. But any nonfiction, and I kind of want to read that one, the millennial one.
Well, you could technically count A Court of Thorn and Roses as historical fiction.
I mean, if we're going to do that, I've read a lot of historical fiction in terms of fantasy, if that's what you want to say. And I mean, for mystery, I read maybe like a horror thriller mystery, White Smoke by Tiffany Jackson.
Right.
So, I mean, that was like the last book I finished too. So I guess that kind of counts. And that one was about, I think I've talked about it before, the newly blended family. The main character was the teenager, and they all moved to this new place because her mom got a new job that also included a house to live in, and there was a lot of this like kind of mysterious circumstances surrounding the town, and an incident that had happened in the past, and it was like kind of more deserted on the street they lived, and then things in their own house started happening that were really bizarre, like stuff being left out that they didn't do, or hearing things and stuff. So it was kind of like this thriller horror suspense type of book that had the mystery element of that. So yeah, that one, I did like that book. So I guess you could say I did read that one. I do need to read some cozy mysteries, and they are on my list. I'm just terrible at getting to them.
And that's what counts. And there's still 8 months left in the year.
Yeah. Honestly, like I said, enjoying reading is most important, and I feel like I have definitely been doing that this year. And I've read quite a few books that I did really like. Have you read anything for yourself that's been your favorite so far?
This year?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I was really taken aback by how much I enjoyed A Court of Thorn and Roses. Not the first book, the series, I think, as a whole.
In general. I like how you made sure to single out the
But
yes.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I've enjoyed a lot of the books that I've read this year.
Yeah.
There isn't one in particular that stands out.
Mm-hmm.
As in, oh my gosh, I enjoyed that so much. But I've really been enjoying all the books that I've read so far this year. I've read a decent variety, not necessarily a balanced variety, but I've read a handful of mystery, I've read a handful of romantic comedy, a handful of fantasy, I've read a couple nonfiction.
Yeah, I'd say I have read quite a bit. Obviously my variety just looks different than yours. I've read a lot of graphic novels and fantasy and YA and adult and some thrillery stuff, but I could do better on my goals.
Well, we could all always do better on our goals.
I mean, yeah, the main point is, though, that I've pretty much liked everything. I don't think I've had a book that I didn't like. I mean, I would probably not finish it if I didn't.
I think what's most important to remember is to ask yourself, am I reading in such a way that keeps me reading?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And, yeah.
If the answer is no, maybe don't read that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
agreed.
for sure. Anyhow, I think that's everything that we have for this episode.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the whole episode.
What we really should say is thank you for listening, but as much as we love having listeners, we would love it even more if we saw you at the library.
For questions, call us at 573-756-5779.